hollow objects in mirror. Say the rearview mirror is a mouth that only opens when you don't want it to. I didn't believe that until the night. The mirror smiled back. It was a Tuesday in late October. The kind of cold that crawls into the bones of your fingers and makes the steering wheel feel like a metal tombstone. The city had buttoned itself quiet. Rain fell in slow, fat drops, and the only sound was the damp hiss of my tires on Riverway. Work had run late. My thoughts were numb. A takeout bag breathed warmth at the passenger seat. I remember the road in front of me as a tunnel of wet black glass, the yellow lane markers slick as watercolor. I remember lifting my coffee and seeing the mirror too. And then a face in the back seat. No movement, no breath. Just a young woman's face, wet hair pasted to pale skin, eyes the color of deep water, mouth set in an almost bare line that might have once been a smile. I snapped my eyes forward so hard the muscles in my neck popped. I told myself the logical story reflection trick of light. For Tygon counted 3 street lights before daring a second look. Empty cloth. The back seat seemed to record me. Was nothing but gray upholstery and a childhood stain of ketchup older than my current address. But in the mirror, she was still there. Closer, the light turned green. My foot found the gas. I didn't look back again until the driveway. Even then, I made a bargain with myself. Keys out, door open. Rideshare driver who found wet footprints on the inside of the back window. A long-haul trucker who swore his sleeping wife turned her head and wasn't his wife at all. A teenager who opened the door at a red light and let the night out. Half the comments were jokes. The other half were warnings. Don't drive alone. Don't look too long. Don't say yes to what nobody said. That afternoon the warehouse's lights flickered. We stacked boxes by headlamp, laughing at ourselves for being spooky about a minor outage. The forklift beeped in the dark like a reversed heart monitor. It was almost a relief when the storm that had been lingering all week finally let go and slammed the building with rain like 1,000 small fists. I clocked out early, hoping to beat the flood on Riverway. The sky outside the roll-up door looked like a bruise. I hugged my jacket to my throat and ran for the car. The rain found every seam dot as the wipers beat back water. I told myself another story, one that fit best, a trick of parallax. The backseat scene indirectly becomes a canvas, and your brain paints what you fear. I told myself not to look. I looked, not a face this time. Not exactly. The backseat in the mirror was a gray shape like someone had tossed a coat there in a hurry. The coat breathed. I blinked hard. When my eyes opened, the seat in the mirror was only a seat. Sleep, I told myself. You need sleep. The light changed. The river rose and clapped its wet hands against the bridge. In the mirror, just before the hill, the coat-worn shape rippled and then flattened like a tide going out. I made it home on muscle memory. I made it to bed on the last battery of reason I had left. When the house finally settled around me, the rain stitching me in on all sides, I dreamed of the river. Not water, but something underneath it that wore water like a dress. Chapter 2 Rules of the Mirror the next day. I brought someone else. I don't do haunted, said Fish. Which meant she would. Fish worked night security at the self-storage on Dillon. A job that suited the way she could stare at a TV bank for 6 hours without moving anything but her cigarettes. She had the kind of listening face that made people confess to things they hadn't done yet. If this is a prank, she said as we buckled in, I'll forgive you. But only because it's Tuesday. No prank, I said. Just eyes being stupid. Your eyes aren't stupid, she said. They're just like the rest of you. Tired and cranky. We hit Riverway just as the afternoon went gray. The water was high enough to lick the underside of the old pedestrian walkway, a spine of bolted iron the city meant to replace and never did. Strips of police tape fluttered on the fence posts from an accident the week before. A sedan had misjudged the corner and kissed a tree it didn't survive. The news had made it sound like weather did the killing. The flowers zip tied to the chain link said otherwise. Look, I said, I'm going to check the mirror. If you see me drive off the bridge, punch you in the ear, Fish said. Got it. I glanced nothing. I glanced again. Still nothing. My heart climbed down one rung of the ladder in my throat. Then Fish said quietly, don't freak out, which is the one sentence that guarantees panic in the mirror behind my right shoulder. The backseat shape had the outline of a person folded up small, knees toward chest. Hair like wet weeds lay in a dark sheet. Beneath the strands, pale skin glimmered the way fish bellies do when you bring them close to the surface. Fish did not look at the mirror. She stared at the back seat directly. What do you see? I asked. Upholstery, she said, and crumbs. Did you know you lived like a raccoon? In the mirror. She didn't look. Why? You know why? She lit a cigarette and flipped the window down an inch. The rain leaked in like it had been waiting. Okay, Fish said to the air behind us, conversational. If you're real, I respect that. If you're not, I also respect that. Either way, no touching. The back seat in the mirror rippled, not the seat. The spaced-out Fish kept her eyes on me. Test something for me. What? Angle the mirror up until you catch the back window, and down again. Do it slowly. Tell me when. I did as told. The ghost of a shape stretched like a smear of watercolor when the mirror lifted toward the rear glass. When the mirror tilted lower, the shape compressed, then seemed to coalesce tighter, like an animal tensing before a spring. Again, Fish said, the shape obeyed the mirror like tide obeys the moon. Rule number 1, she said. It lives in the reflection, or at least per person. That's not a rule, I said. That's a property. Rule number 2, Fish continued, ignoring me. Mirror unwound like smoke. I parked and killed the engine. For a long moment, we sat with our hands orphaned and listened to the engine tick its way back to stillness. Fish blew her last thread of smoke at the ceiling. Okay, she said. Tomorrow we're installing a dash cam. Why? So we can have a second pair of eyes. And because when this is over, and we both agree it never happened, I want to have to delete something for real. Chapter 3, Playback Dash Cams. It turns out, don't care about ghosts. They care about memory cards and mounting angles, and whether the cord will reach the cigarette lighter. Port you never use. We installed one anyway. Fish did the sticky backing like a woman applying a band-aid in a hurricane. I fed the cable under the headliner. We argued gently about which way was left until the camera blinked red and consented to watch the world dot on the first night of surveillance. Nothing happened. Riverway was a polite black ribbon that gave us wet light and more rules. Don't drive the inside curve if the river is high. Don't ride your brakes on the hill. Don't point your face directly into the mirror while thinking about the mirror. On the second night, I was alone. The warehouse shift ran late. The parking lot had emptied down to a few worker cars and a manager's truck with a dent like a fist print. I sat in the driver's seat and let the dash cam boot. Its red dot stared like a patient eye. I pulled onto Riverway, halfway to the bridge. The smell returned with earth, cold as pocketed coins. I cracked the window and let the rain wet my cheek. My heart wore a coat of static. Don't look. I told myself, look. The mirror showed the shape again, unfolded now, taller than before. Hair draped dark ropes onto the seat. face was turned half away, the cheek white with a lavender undertow like old bruise. The mouth was an unpracticed line. I did what 1,000 people before me had done in 1,000 late-night forums. I spoke into empty air like it had a name. Can you hear me? The mouth in the mirror twitched, then smoothed. The eye that I could see was glossy as a black button. The car hit a small pothole we all pretend isn't there. The bump shook the mirror, which shook her, which shook something inside me that felt like a loose nail in a step you've always meant to fix. Okay, I said. Okay, something thumped lightly. Not outside, inside the car. The smallest sound of palm on cloth. I pulled over just past the bridge. Hazards blinking a nervous Morse. I turned slowly to look directly into the back seat. No one. Just a damp ring where someone had placed a hand exactly once. I faced forward and breathed until my ribcage agreed to loosen its straps. The hazards ticked. The river talked in the voice of 1,000,000 small throats. I'm going to start driving, I told the empty car. You can come if you want. I won't ask you to leave. I won't ask you to stay. The mirror showed nothing but the parcel of interior the camera could also see. The smell didn't leave. When I got home, I did the thing I promised myself I wouldn't do. I watched the footage. Fish came over with 2 cans of bad beer and moral support. We huddled over my laptop at the kitchen table like kids around an Ouija board. Minute by minute, Riverway unspooled. Wipers swept, street lights smeared gold. The timeline crawled toward the spot where I had seen a backseat turn into a person. There, I said. We slowed the playback. The camera had a guilty, grainy eye. It swallowed details and spit back grays. The back seat was only cloth. The window behind it was only wet glass. Wait, Fish said. She rewound 3 seconds and tapped the space. The frame paused. The back windshield shone with the smear of street lights and rain at the very bottom edge of the frame. Pressed into the lower corner of the back window, a shape like the pad of a fingertip appeared and disappeared between frames. Not a hand, not a face. Just the suggestion of touch inside the glass. Could be artifact. Fish said could be. I said. We watched it again. It was not artifact. It was the pressure of something inside the reflection of the car wanting to press farther. I closed the laptop. I didn't want to watch the rest. Fish put a cigarette between her lips and didn't light it. Rule number 6, she said. Reflection stat. The camera sees one thing, the mirror another, the eye another still. The overlap is where it leaks. Leaking what? I said us. She said softly. Or it. Or both. Chapter 4. History lesson. You spend enough nights with a ghost that doesn't say its name. You start trying to give it one. I went to the library. Not the bright new branch with plants, but the old one with a ceiling like bleached ribs. The local history room smelled like dust and a single lemon. A volunteer who wore her cardigan-like armor helped me find old newspaper, clippings about Riverway. Lots of accidents, she said without looking up from the indexing book. It's a bad bend. Any drownings? I asked. She smiled without teeth. It's a river I spent a day drowning in other people's endings. A stolen car that went over the rail in 92. A school bus that fishtailed in 78. No children aboard. The headline swore. A woman who slipped from the pedestrian walkway at midnight and vanished until spring. A man who jumped. A suitcase that floated, open, and changed the town. One story that my skin fell and the digital thermometer didn't. Fish called while I was parked at the Overlook. How's your girlfriend? She said. Don't, I said. Fair, she said. Listen, my cousin works county water rescue. I asked him nothing, just whether people stick. His answer was that sometimes, in certain conditions, even when you find the body, not all of it comes back. Fish, I said. I know, she said. I'm just saying. Maybe there's a reason she likes glass. It's the only surface slick enough to keep the shape. Maybe, I said. Or maybe it's because I have a mirror and she needs a place to stand. Rule number 7, Fish said. Don't make altars out of necessary objects. What does that even mean? It means don't stare at the mirror like it's church, she said. Use it and move on. I laughed. Working on it. Good, she said. Also, my cousin says the city's finally replacing the pedestrian span next month. Thought you'd want to know. I did not want to know. But I was glad to have a date for the part of the river that would be torn out and replaced with something that had never met the woman who vanished under it. Chapter 5, The Passenger. The night it changed. The city was full of fog. Fog is a liar. It says the world is soft when the world is not. It makes the road unspool like ribbon and hides the claw marks left by other people's attempts at flight. I had to cross the bridge late, later than even my bad habits demanded. The warehouse clock had been wrong. I had been wronger. The paperwork had decided to reproduce. By the time the last pallet winked into its slot like a Tetris piece, the hour had gone thin. I told myself I would take the long way up over Maple and down 4th, away from Riverway, but muscle memory is a stronger organ than the heart. My hands turned without asking. The car found the river the way water finds a hole. As soon as the road bent, the smell rose river cold, cave black. The mirror blurred, as if fog had pushed into the glass. I wiped it with my sleeve without thinking, which is both insane and exactly right. When your seeing is wrong, you try to fix it with whatever hand you have. The mirror cleared. She was there. Not a hint, not a shape. A woman, folded quiet, hair a curtain away from her face. The interior light hadn't come on. The dashboard washed us both in soft blue. Her clothes were what water makes of clothes, shaped without seam, cloth fused to skin like a second idea. I didn't break. I didn't swerve. I did the most ordinary thing I could think of. I turned the radio on to a station that plays old love songs and pretends the world stopped and said. A tenor sang about a girl on a dock. Okay, I said, and my voice was a stone dropped in a shallow lake. Okay. Fog shouldered the car. The river to my right was a moving dark. The guardrail ahead gleamed wet with streetlight. Seatbelt, I said, and immediately hated myself. She did not move. Of course, she did not move. The seatbelt hung slack like a tongue. The mirror kept her in place. When I darted a glance over my shoulder, the back seat was nothing but gloom. Riverway, I said, because saying the name of a thing sometimes makes it smaller. I'm taking you past it. I'm not stopping. If you're coming with me, you're coming past it. If you're not, I'll check later, and you won't move. Her mouth moved. Not a word. A shape of one. Oh, then closed again. I eased over the bridge like you carry a sleeping child. All attention, no sound. The car's tires hummed on the seam in the concrete that always sings. The river below never looked up. The fog closed around us like a blessing that becomes a hand on the far side. The smell thinned, the mirror emptied, something in the seat behind me exhaled. I pulled into the overlooked turnout and killed the engine. For once, I kept my hands on the wheel, as if it were the only honest object left. I counted to 10 and then to 20. The sound of the river climbed the hill. In the mirror, the back seat was an honest seat. Directly, it was a square of dark and the collapsed shadow of my jacket. I do not know why I did what I did next. Maybe I believed there is a kind of fairness in touching the places that have touched you. Maybe I wanted proof I could describe out loud later. I reached one hand behind me and felt for the center of the seat. My palm found wet glove, not soaked a dew of moisture like breath of a mirror, under the cloth. Something cooler than cloth waited still as a stone at the bottom of a creek. I pulled my head back like I put it in the stove on my skin. A crescent of cold remained as if the temperature hadn't shaped someone's hand. I put the car in drive and went home along streets that felt borrowed. Chapter 6. House rules you can bring something home without meaning to. The river for advice. It only speaks drowning. I went home without asking. Chapter 7. The night it rained upside down, the storm that finally tore the scaffolding off the pedestrian span arrived on a Friday. The kind of weather that makes the news anchors smile too hard. The city wrapped its mouth tight and stayed inside. Even the bars had thin crowds. My shift ran long on purpose. No one wanted to leave a pallet half-wrapped and imagine it tipping in the dark by the time I hit Riverway. It felt like the road was the only thing this storm hadn't eaten. The car's heater worked too hard, and not at all. The windshield wipers found their top speed and wished for more. The mirror wore a coat of rain it shouldn't wear. I wiped it with the back of my hand, felt the cold bleed into my knuckles, and watched as the mirror cleared to show her in the middle seat, closer than before. A face built of water and the stubbornness of skin. Hair plastered, dressed newest with the sheen of the storm. In the dim blue wash of the dash, her eyes were not the dead black I'd imagined, but something worse, a color that used to be alive. I kept the wheel straight. The guardrail was a silver line to the right. The left was a black wall that might have contained trees or might have contained nothing. Seatbelt, I said again. A ritual of absurdity. She turned her head then. A small, slow arc that put her eyes on the back of my head. In the mirror, the movement looked like a thought forming. The river was high. The span above the road stuttered with wind. The yellow diamond sign that warns about a curve clapped itself stupid. Okay, I said, like you talk to a skittish horse. We're going slow. The car hydroplaned for half a breath and then found grip. My foot remembered to be gentle. The guardrail stitched us to the road, a thread between two holes. From the back seat, a sound like wet cloth sliding over plastic settled into the air. Don't, I said, to it, to me, to the river, to the mirror. The old span above the road groaned a sound of metal exceeding its throat. Something scaffolding a sign. The accumulated debris of a week of rigging broke free and swung. I braked before the brain thought the word. The car slowed enough to keep the swing a distant fact and not a present name. The sound in the back seat moved forward with my seat. The mirror showed the passenger leaned forward just enough to be an angle. Stay back, I said, and Fish's imagined voice said in my ear. Rule number 9, don't tell the river what to do in its own house. I crawled the rest of the span. The thing that had swung metal plastic, an idea thumped itself into quiet behind us. The car and I exhaled at the same time. On the far side, the storm softened by 1%. The mirror wore her like a watermark, and then I did the stupidest thing of all. I spoke to her as if she could answer questions. Do you want me to stop? I asked. Her mouth gave me the shape of Ola Gang. A sound grew in the car low as a hum. Do you want me to keep going? The hum changed key, a half step up. The way songs climb to tell you something important. I drove dot at the overlook. I did not stop. At the off-ramp, I did not turn. I kept driving until the river was not beside me and the smell in the car had faded to the memory of rain. When the neighborhood arrived, the mirror emptied. I pulled to the curb and turned the engine off. The house across the street had left its porch like the way we leave a slice of bread out for the night. Rule number 10, I said aloud. to no one. If you ask and it hums, that's a yes. Behind me, something like a laugh happened. Or maybe it was the storm finding a new corner of the gutter. Chapter 8. The Vista. Rearview mirror is not the only mouth in a house. There is the oven door that reflects you when you bend to open it. There is the black screen of the TV that returns your face without your permission. There is the bathroom mirror, faithful as a dog, unfaithful as water. The night she came inside, it felt less like a choice and more like a tie. I had set a bowl by the door because Fish told me to. Not water, she said. Never water. Salt. It's a contract, she said. It says this is the line. Step around it, and you've agreed to our rules. The bowl didn't stop the bowl that came with her. It mapped it at 2:41. The house looked as if someone had walked the hall and barely touched the pictures on the wall, so they moved, not at all, but decided to remember moving. The air in my room grew heavy, then thin. The mirror on the dresser filled over with fog from no breath I owned. I sat up with the feeling of having been called by my full name. The room was not empty. It failed to be empty the way a room does when someone once had been inside it while you were gone and moving slowly. The shadow near the chair by the window was not just shadow anymore. It had a density like a knotted wood. Okay, I said, to choose me again. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my reflection in the oven door. I kept my eyes on the floorboards, on the grain that always looked like river maps when I was a kid. Behind me, a chair sounded as if a knee had brushed it. Not a pull, not a drag of presence accounting for furniture. I'm going back to bed, I said at the threshold, because Fish's rules had given me sentences that worked like handrails in the dark. And then I'll sleep. If you can sleep, you can watch. But don't touch the house, listened. The house didn't answer. I left the glass on the table and walked the narrow hall. In my room, the dresser mirror cleared another small stripe, a sibling to the first. It was like someone with cold fingers had practiced the motion of looking. I lay down and pulled the blanket to my chin. A pressure settled on the end of the mattress, subtle enough to call it a shift in springs. Undeniable enough to call it company. Don't touch, I said again. Softer than prayer, the pressure withdrew like a tide that likes you, somewhere between one heartbeat and many. I slept when morning came. The glass on the table had fogged from the inside. Chapter 9. Names. I think she's learning the house, Fish said, stirring sugar into terrible coffee at the diner that pretends it never closed. And you're letting her. She came in on her own, I said. I didn't open anything. Fish lifted a brow. You drive a mirror to the river every night and invite it home. Opening is relative. I never said her name, I said, and hated that I had a name to not say. Fish tapped her spoon against the cup. Good, keep not saying it. Name's mine. Titles, those titles are safe. Passenger is a title, visitor. Backseat, even she is a kind of hedge. She fogged a glass from the inside, I said. Then she's thirsty for edges. Fish said, glass is edge. Mirror is edge. Water is edge. She wants to press where one thing becomes another. I pushed my plate away. There's a bridge demo next week. They're closing the span for a day and starting the replacement. I know, Fish said. I also know you're thinking that the river swallowing its old mouth might give her a new one. I'm thinking, I said carefully, about crossings. If there's a place to cross, maybe she can. Rule number 11, Fish said. Don't pretend to be the ferryman unless you own a boat and a coin. What does that even mean? It means if you guide her, you might go with her, Fish said. And I like you in this county. I wanted to say I won't go. I wanted to say I can steer. I wanted to say, I'm not the kind of person who gets pulled. Instead, I said, come with me to the river, to the demo. Fish sighed like someone agreeing to adopt a cat. Fine, but we bring salt, and we don't say her name. We don't have her name, I said. Fish looked at me like mirrors look, don't we? I folded my hands around the heat of the mug and didn't answer. Chapter 10. The closing. They closed Riverway at dawn and put up orange signs that looked like loud flowers. A contractor's crane stretched its neck like a prehistoric bird above the pedestrian span. Men in reflective vests walked with the careful swagger of people who trust the physics of what they build. We parked above the overlook and took the footpath down. Fish carrying a small bag that clinked like superstition. Rain had finally run itself out. The river was high but calmer, a chest that had stopped heaving and decided to breathe again at the fence line. A cluster of locals watched the proceedings with the particular reverence of a town that knows water takes what it is on. Someone had taped a laminated photo to the chain link flowers' faces, a date. I kept my eyes on the bolts of the railing, where Fish asked. The middle, I said. Always the middle. We stood shoulder to shoulder while a worker unfastened the last of the temporary braces. The crane took weight. A section of the old span lifted, hesitant at first, then sure. The river, confronted with absence where presence had always been, spoke not with sound but with motion, a subtle widening, a slicking of the surface like a hand smoothing hair. Fish opened her bag and produced 2 packets of salt. She tore one and poured a line at our feet, not to ward anything off, but to keep our own borders bright. Say it, she murmured. What you came to say, I didn't speak to the river. I didn't speak to the air. I spoke straight into the rear view of my mind, into the seat that had become a mouth. I'm at the crossing, I said. If you're ready to be somewhere else, be less here. The surface in front of us rippled, not wind, not wake. A sway like fabric in water. Careful, Fish said. I'm not taking you anywhere, I said, to the passenger who might have been standing behind my shoulder. I looked. The mirror was only mirror. I laughed. And then the back window bloomed with water from the inside and oval like a hand had leaned in and breathed. Don't, I said, and my voice was calmer than I felt. The oval faded. A smaller oval appeared to its right, as if 2 eyes had pressed to glass and then remembered they didn't need to. I didn't break. I didn't speak. Something shifted in the seat behind me, not cloth, not the small settling of a spring. A weight. The honest physics of a body that had decided to act like one. Seatbelt, I said. Reflex, absurd. From the back, a low sound answered. If humming had a shadow, it would be that sound. Okay, I said, because rules are handrails. If you're with me, you're with me. No touching, no face. The humming rose and fell, then settled into a note that felt like acceptance. We crossed the river. On the far side, something inside the car relaxed so palpably that my own shoulders answered. At the first light in town, I stopped. The red washed the interior with a film of borrowed blood. I stared straight ahead. In the corner of my eye, the mirror offered the honest shape of nobody. The light turned green. I went home in the morning. The back seat had a watermark shaped like a body, had sat and then decided not to stay. Chapter 12. The return. The thing about crossings, Fish said a week later, is that they teach you how to cross anything. Doorways, rooms, days. We were on my porch, drinking coffee that had no right to call itself that. The world had moved itself closer to winter. The leaves on the hackberry out front had gone the color of old teeth. I think she's gone, I said, and tried out the sentence like you try a coat. Does it fit? Is it mine? Fish considered the street. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe she learned the other ways a person can be. In a house, I asked. In a mirror, Fish said. In a pause. In the moment you check without meaning to, and the relief comes quick. That's a way of being. I don't want to be the house that holds that, I said. You won't be, Fish said. You'll be the road she used to leave. I breathed. It felt honest. We did ordinary things. Took the trash out. Forgot we had. Remembered again. We went to work and then went home. The car obeyed wind and traffic and neglect with its usual stubbornness. The dashcam's card filled with nothing in particular. Wipers, rain, a cat. Our own tired faces when we sang along to a song we pretended not to know. At the end of the month, I opened the laptop to clean the card. Fish leaned on the counter and narrated the way sports announcers do when they don't know the team. Here we have a left turn, she said. Executed beautifully. A strong commitment to signaling. Look at that lane discipline. Please die, I said fondly. I scrubbed the timeline. An ordinary night, unspooled. At 2:13 a.m., the camera, which had never faltered, glitched a single frame where everything went lighter, like a flash had gone off in the back seat. I froze the frame. The seat was there. The window was there. The raindrops were there, and in the center of the back window, pressed from the inside, a perfect overnod of face, not even Isa coin. The kind you pay ferrymen with in stories older than roads. Fish leaned closer. Huh, she said. That's either very corny or very holy, or both, I said. We watched the frame after. The oval was gone. The road resumed telling its one long story to the tires that listened. I deleted the file. Not because I didn't want it, because holding it felt like asking for more. Epilogue, objects and mirror people ask questions when they smell river on your coat. They ask if it was real. They ask if you're okay. They ask if you'll take Riverway at night, now that the span is new and the bolts are bright as coins. Yes, I say, because fear that can choose is a fear you can live with. They ask if I miss her. I say, I don't know, which is the truth. I don't know if it was her. I don't know if it was me. I don't know if mirrors learn you the way you learn mirrors, and then make something between you and third day. A passenger made of both. Sometimes I wake at 2:13 with the sense that the mattress has remembered me. Sometimes the bathroom mirror fogs in a striped top to bottom, as if a finger colder than breath had taught itself looking and wanted to practice. Sometimes I check the rear view with empty lights and see only seat, only coat, only the slow, honest junk of a person living an ordinary life, and sometimes less now. But sometimes the back window blooms from one frame only, with an oval that isn't near enough. When that happens, I don't speak. I don't invite. I don't deny. I place my hand on the wheel, feel the road like a pulse, and go on.